What is up, guys, and welcome to the final episode of Guarani Vision for 2022, the first ever podcast dedicated to Paraguayan football in English. As always, I'm Roberto Rojas, and joining me are my two great co-hosts, Fede Perez and Ralph Hannah. And unfortunately, we do not have Maria Britos here, but we do want to spend her a special thank you, a special shout out. Of course, being a part of this, it wouldn't have been done without her. So gutted that she's not in here, but of course we send her love. We send the love to her as well as we get into the final episode of Guarani Vision for this year. Another great year in Paraguayan football. A lot of things have happened. Obviously, we're speaking in a day where the World Cup round of 16 is happening. You know, Paraguay will not be in this World Cup, but all hope is given to this national team heading into the next World Cup here in the United States, Canada, and Mexico in 2026. We'll get into that when we have to, but let's talk about what's been going on in Paraguay as a whole, because we've seen so many great things, so many bad things, a lot of drama, a lot of exciting things. And, we've been able to cover it here on Guarani Vision for the entire year. I'm excited to see what you guys think about it. So let's go straight to the motherland. As I always like to say to Fede Perez, in terms of how the year has gone, it hasn't been without a lot of drama, like I've always mentioned. But I think certainly in this case, we had a lot of highs and lows, especially in kind of the first really big year where, the pandemic is, not affecting us a lot, not a lot of COVID cases. Yes, it's still an issue, obviously, but I think we were able to finally get the first full year of Paraguayan football since the start of the pandemic.
Yeah, it wasn't a full year because of the situation with the World Cup, right? That the whole calendar was going to be way tighter this year, and it really felt that way, Roberto. Like we had games pretty much every 3 days with the Libertadores starting. Then we had Sudamericana, where we had, I believe, Guaireña was the biggest team there who made it the furthest, and then the Apertura, the Clausura, pretty much no time in between one tournament and the other. So everything just pretty much felt like one whole season, and we pretty much didn't have any time to rest. And right now it feels really weird, to be honest with you. All this whole time, we have pretty much 2 months where nothing is pretty much happening here in Paraguay in terms of the local league. So it does feel kind of odd in that sense, just because the World Cup is being played at the end of the year. And that has kind of totally driven the players away from their situation of training and keeping it in shape. Most of them are on vacations as of right now. Some have left the country. Some go to the Caribbean. Some go to other continents. Some even went to see the World Cup. I was actually watching. So, the trainers got to do their job in trying to keep their players in shape, to see when the training ground is going to start again. The preseason, some teams are going to start off right away, even before Christmas. Right now in December, just because they don't want to lose any time. But we got to look back, right? We got to see and remember the best moments of this 2022, because a lot of things really happened. And I got my highlights. I want to share with you guys. And there are a couple of things that we should probably mention on this last episode. Yeah, obviously a shout out to Maria. So thankful to her for always being here. She had a really busy year. We got to tell everybody that listens to Guarani Vision, and I'm so happy about that, because that means that she's been working and working just like we've been doing here all year round. So mainly just want to thank everybody for being on that other side, always listening to our podcast. And let's get this ball rolling, Roberto and Ralph.
Let's get it rolling indeed, Fede. I love your energy. Let's go straight to South Beach, where, obviously we'll go into actually a little bit of housekeeping. Obviously, speaking about the national team, where I had the honor of going and being with Ralph for a couple of days over there in Miami as Paraguay took on Colombia in a friendly over there at Inter Miami's stadium, the DRV Pink Stadium in Fort Lauderdale. And it was a game that, and we'll discuss that here, where Paraguay was coming into this game coming off a loss to Peru 1-0 over there in Lima, a late goal on the day. And, Paraguay had come into this game without the main players, such as Miguel Miron due to injury, and Julio Enciso due to a visa issue. And, certainly what we saw over there in Fort Lauderdale, which, was a great setting, obviously predominantly Colombian. As we saw, we were able to meet with some fans over there, and not a lot of them, but there were some Paraguayan fans that did make it to Fort Lauderdale for this game. But talking strictly on the football sense, I think we saw a Paraguay side that I think gives us a lot more questions and answers heading into the new year because, certainly for Guillermo Barros-Schelotto, I think he's got a lot on his plate to deal with heading into the new year and really what he wants to get out of this Paraguay side before they go into big competitive matches.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, hi guys. Happy to do this final episode of the year, but it's true we don't get to go out on a high note when we talk about the national team who've been on a good run before these final two friendlies of the year. They'd not been maybe playing very well, but they've been getting results. And then I think what we saw here against both Peru and Colombia is they didn't play too well and they didn't get the results this time. Well, Peru maybe the first half. I should give them that. The first half they looked good and then dropped off. But particularly the Colombia game that we were at, yeah, I mean it was great atmosphere with the Colombian fans there filling out the stadium because they were there to watch people like James Rodriguez and Falcao. We were there. I was there to hopefully see Julio Enciso because I haven't seen him in the flesh yet. Because when I went to Paraguay, he was injured for those final games with Libertad, but now it turned out he couldn't travel to the US because of a visa issue. So I'm still waiting. That's still elusive. I'll have to go and watch him in Brighton maybe. But yeah, talking about the game, I just think at no point did Paraguay really kind of match the rhythm of Colombia. Colombia were playing at a different kind of pace and really just moving the ball much quicker through transitions that Paraguay didn't seem to ever cope with, and we could never impose ourselves on the match that way. There was a lot of kind of I felt a struggle really to find that system, that base that Paraguay wanted to use during the game, and so it was disappointing, and it was really disappointing that they conceded again from a set piece, which is something we had asked Barros-Schelotto in the pre-match press conference, and he kind of brushed that off and said it wasn't of particular importance, that they need to improve everywhere. But I just feel there's a very basic thing that you can start to improve in, and good teams, they want to get that right from the beginning. So like you say, a lot to work on after watching that final game of the year for the Albiroja, but we do have the glimmer of hope that they were missing some key players, especially our two Premier League stars, who should be back in the fold next season.
Yeah, definitely, Fede. I mean, I'll go to you on that one too. I mean, how have you assessed really this whole year for Paraguay? Because really, and then we'll get into kind of a discussion of the year-long assessment, because this was a Paraguay side that didn't make the World Cup, as we obviously have stated, had to play the last few games of qualifiers at the start of the year, where at the beginning they actually had a chance to qualify. It was the game against Uruguay at home at La Nueva Olla. That was kind of the make or break game, one of the very many that we've spoken about Paraguay during this whole qualification process. But I think ultimately, one of the things that we have to get from this is that it's still a Paraguay side that unfortunately has still not found its identity. It still hasn't found what kind of way they want to play, what kind of a system and kind of idea that they want to play. And I think we're starting to see kind of the similar issues that Berizzo had to deal with for many years, that's now dealing with Guillermo Barros-Schelotto. I mean, yeah, we got some positive results in games against South Korea, Mexico, Morocco, UAE, and whatnot, but you do see a level of inconsistency, and that's something that a national team definitely does not want to have if they strive to go back to a World Cup, or at least try to compete in competitions like the Copa America, for example.
Yeah, lately it looked like we were ready to compete again. It looked like everything was starting to get together. But yeah, I kind of had flashbacks, just like you guys did, watching this team play against Peru and play against Colombia. I mean, we had friendlies right before the Osorio era, right before the Berizzo era also. And, they all got their friendlies and it looked like the team was starting to look good. You saw a couple players you wanted to see during the road to the World Cup, and then the team just never got together, right? And it was the same thing pretty much the other day against Colombia. I mean, these guys have been playing for so long together, and you're waiting for a couple of players also to kind of break through. They've been getting their chances, more and more chances, and I could name a few of them. And I don't think they settled in the team either. Like Jesus Medina, for instance. I mean, he got several chances in these friendlies. Matias Rojas also came back to that midfield. I mean, some players have come and gone from this team. They felt pretty much out of the squad, and now they're back in it. And they really need to maintain their level. They need to win that spot, and I believe that's the situation as of right now in the national team. The thing is, time is over. In March, in July, maybe in June, the road to a new World Cup will start, and the team needs to get ready. And it does not look like it's ready. And just when you needed to put people by your side, and you needed to put the fans again with this team, you lost these two last games against two teams that you're gonna face. Uh, you're gonna go up against real soon. So it did not feel good, Roberto. I did not like what I saw from the defense. I did not like what I saw from the offense either. So the team does not look stable, and there's not much changes. Yeah, a couple of new names, but the system's not changing. The way the team is playing has not changed that much. So people are not really feeling good about this team as of right now. I mean, yeah, you look at the World Cup, and only Argentina and Brazil really made it out of the group stage. The rest of the South American teams, the other two South American teams that went, Ecuador and Uruguay, they couldn't do it. So, the level clearly here in South America, it's very tight. I think it's little details besides Argentina and Brazil. I think we're gonna have a tight race again but I think we have so much to be worried about as of right now. Even Steloto's job, I think, is still in review. He needs to make up his mind. He needs to put things in order, because as of right now, this team does not look like it's going to the next World Cup. Hopefully, things are different in 2023, Roberto, because 2022 for the national team was not different at all than what it's been these last couple of years. Unfortunately, things did not change for the Azul Roja in 2022.
They really missed Richard Ortiz. So Richard Ortiz, when he played, Paraguay won most of their games. But when he didn't play, they not only lost but failed to score. The big problem with Richard Ortiz is he's not really the solution. He's way too old. So they're really trying to find who
can't rely on Richard, Ralph.
Exactly. Yeah, they're trying to find someone who can play with Cubas, but they don't seem to find the right person, be it Brian Ojeda. Diego Gomez is maybe a bit more attacking, but they're trying to find somebody to slot in there to fill that void, and they really don't have the option at the moment. One high point let's just mention is Ramon Sosa did make his debut late on in the Colombia games, so that's really nice for him to think that a player who was playing at River Plate in Paraguay not so long ago has now come through Olympia, where I think he did well in patches and not so good in others, but he got his move to Gimnasia, and there he's really kicked on, and so that's why he earned that debut, and that could be an exciting player, because Fede mentioned Jesus Medina, that maybe hasn't been able to make the same impact. It's a similar position, so that might be someone that we can look forward to. But we were talking after the game with a few of the players and the staff, and it was mentioned that I think what Paraguay really needs is a striker, because it's been 3 games now without a goal, the 2 defeats and the 0-0 against Morocco. So they need to find those goals from somewhere, and maybe it's in Ciso when he's fully fit, but otherwise they need a number 9, just a real out and out striker who can get those goals.
And then certainly when the goals are coming from other players, such as midfielders typically, or wingers like an Almiron, as we obviously see at Newcastle, David Gonzalez, who scored the last one of the last goals that Paraguay have scored in open play. Balbuena, I think he is the last goal scorer for Paraguay in a game, and that was from a set piece. I think it shows the underlying issues that Paraguay have gone through for quite some time. It's always been that way. Where the goal's going to come from, it's not the case of seeing a team that, for some countries in the world, they have consistent goal scorers that they can rely on, like, I don't know, Mitrovic at Serbia or Harry Kane at England or that kind of thing. You don't see that for Paraguay, and that's kind of one of the issues that maybe Guillermo Barcelona has to look at, has to give confidence to, and see what comes about, because this new year, it's really I wouldn't say it's a formality, I would say, but it's definitely not something where we have anything to work for because, the next Copa America is not till the following year in 2024. We don't know what qualification is going to be like for the World Cup in 2026, where more spots are going to be open, which in theory would help Paraguay, but also the pressure is on them to say, you can't fail this time now. So that's kind of where we're at right now. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But I want you guys to play school teacher in this case. So if you had to give a grade to Paraguay in 2022 for their whole run as a whole, or Guillermo Barcelona as a whole, if you had to give them a grade, what would it be? Fede, I'll let you go first. You seem very interested.
Well, the ceiling has been really low lately, right? For us, I mean, our standards have been really low with this team lately. So our expectations have been really low with this team. So, during the year we won a couple of games. We kind of got in the streak, so it hasn't been all bad, I would say. And just like Ralph was saying, yeah, we saw a couple of new players. I'm also kind of one of them. Not that many. I want to see more of Diego Morel. For instance, in that midfield, that's a player we've always talked about. I want to see some new blood on this team. I think Celoto can do it, but he doesn't have any more time now. He doesn't have any more games, so his time to prepare for this is kind of over. That's my concern as of right now. So I'm gonna give this team a C minus this year. I mean, and I'm not giving them a D just because they won a couple of games, but just the way they looked on field. For me, it's a D, but I'm gonna give them a C minus just because they won a couple.
Ralph, what do you say?
I was going with the C minus as well, and the things that were sticking in my head were two things. One, the performance against Ecuador, which was definitely their best game of the year, and it's the only one time they had Morales and Enciso playing together. We don't know what Morales will be like when he comes back from his injury. So if he's in that same kind of form, I mean, if he hadn't suffered that injury in that game against Ecuador, he would be playing abroad by now. I'm sure of that. So we'll see what happens when he comes back. And so that, and also the way they managed to win a few games, not playing particularly well. That's a useful, that's kind of a useful facet to have, right? To be able to win when you're not playing well. And that's something that Barros Schelotto brings that Berizzo didn't, I think. Berizzo was very strict on the style of the formation, the possession, the type of game he wanted to impose. Whereas I think Barros Schelotto is a bit more pragmatic in that we're going to go direct if we have to, find the spaces and find the goal, which was the case against Mexico, for example, the other game Roberto and I were able to see live this year. So yeah, a C minus for me. There's plenty of work to do.
Yeah, definitely. If I had to write something on, you know how your teachers used to write stuff on your papers if you did badly. This is the same thing for me. C minus, lots of improvement needed. I think that's certainly something that we can agree on across the board. Yes, yeah, they got a couple of wins, and that gives them a little bit of a boost. And not say it's like an F or a D or anything like that, but it's certainly not to the level of B or an A for sure. But yeah, no, a C minus for them. And yeah, it's a good point what Fede mentioned. Really the bar isn't exactly the highest either. So it in theory, it's easy for them to get to that bar, but they make it difficult for them to reach it. So I think that's kind of the things that I think would assess this Paraguay side. But we'll see what happens next year. Obviously, we'll see what Paraguay has to do in friendlies or whatever type of competition they're going to play in after the new year. So we'll get into that when we do, as we switch gears now to really what we've got from this entire year, because from drama from the likes of, we can go on for hours about the scandals that have been going on, the fights, the teams getting promoted, relegated, the bickering between some teams as well. I mean, you could name it all. We could be stuck here for a few hours, but we only have a few minutes to discuss that. But as we see, this is a year that we saw Paraguay teams do fairly well in competitions like the Copa Libertadores or the Sudamericana. Didn't really reach any latter stages of the competition. We saw Olimpia and Libertad win their respective league titles. Club Ameliano, for the first time ever in their first year from the Intermedio, going straight to the Primera, winning the Copa Paraguay, which is obviously a big thing for them, a big boost for them financially, and they get to play in an international competition But I mean, ultimately, Fede, I'll go to you on this one. What has been some of the highlights that you've seen from Paraguayan football as a whole? I mean, we can even go into what we've seen from players abroad, like Miguel Miron finding his form and Ciso making that big jump from Libertad to Brighton playing in the Premier League. So many things going on. What are some of the things that you can capture from this 2022 in Paraguayan
You know,
football?
yeah, just as I was hearing you, just as I was listening to you recall some of these important things that happened in this 2022. I mean, just the way it ended. I mean, Emiliano probably shocked most people, right? With that ending, not only making it to the Sudamericana, winning the Copa Paraguay, but also saving themselves and being able to stay in this first division. That was a situation that looked really hard for them. So, if I had to put a top three, I think Emiliano is there in my top three also. But I kind of wanted to go more on the road of signings this year. The big sell for me was Julio Enciso. I mean, just to see a guy that I was really thrilled about, just the way that he was playing in Libertad. Started really well the year playing in Libertadores. Also got more experience right before leaving the country in that locker room with Roque Santa Cruz, with Oscar Tacuara Cardoso, with players that have already made it in Europe. This guy was ready for a bigger stage, and he got that bigger stage. He played already in Premier League. He already got time in Brighton, so I'm really happy. I think that was the biggest move that happened in the Paraguayan game, in Paraguay itself the whole year. I mean, that was the big sell, no doubt about it. Not just because of the money that was moved around to Libertad, but also just because we had a player that went straight from Paraguay to the Premier League, and we're showing the world that we can do it, that we have those players, and hopefully he's not the only one. So I'm gonna put that as the highlight of my year, and then I'm gonna go on the negative side and say what was the worst signing one of these teams did, right? Like your expectations were up there, and he just couldn't do it, and that's I'm gonna go with the Bolivian. I'm gonna go with Cerro Porteño striker Marcelo Moreno Martins. I mean, everybody was flying high with this name when everybody found out that he was coming to Paraguay, that he was gonna have the starting role in Cerro Porteño's team, and that he had the chance to take this team to a whole new level, and that just didn't happen, Roberto. And we can go back to the topic a little bit later with Mateo Gonzalez's situation after the season was over, talking about what happened in that locker room, that why the guys were not getting along, why they were not giving the ball that much to Marcelo Moreno Martin. Apparently, it was just not about football. There was more behind the scenes, behind the whole situation, but they just couldn't do it. They just couldn't get it together. And I'm talking about one of the guys that probably has the best salary, one of the best salaries here in the Paraguayan league in these last two seasons. So I'm looking at the good and I'm looking at the bad. The good, obviously, Julio Cesar going to the Premier League. The bad was Cerro Porteño bringing to the Paraguayan league the top scorer of the South American, and he couldn't do it. He just couldn't bring his game to Paraguay league, and for me that was a shock, to be honest. Like to have that kind of caliber, that kind of player, and just not make him the star that he could possibly be.
Yeah, the Julian Ciso transfer is so big as well because it didn't happen in January. And so there was a fear that he had missed his chance because these big international transfers, there's so much going on behind the scenes between the clubs, the agents, maybe they find another player within those 6 months. Maybe he gets injured. Well, he did get injured, but it wasn't too serious. So I think that coming together was so important. It's so important for us in terms of Paraguayan football and the national team because we needed him to go and also to go to a club that would use him properly, not like Sergio Diaz went to Real Madrid and then gets lost in the like Castilla team and never sees the first team. The way Brighton are using him is much better, and I'm sure this was pretty much in terms of all the Premier League clubs he could have gone to. This was probably the best. But my highlight is different because I'm going to choose something different. I think often we've talked about on this show maybe sometimes the lack of infrastructure or the lack of good administration in Paraguayan football. But one of the highlights and one of the things they have done really well is the new CARFEM Center, which the CARFEM stands for the High Performance Center for women's football. I came across this well over a couple of years ago when I think they often like to celebrate the first unveiling, or they call it like the first dig as they began break ground. But often in Paraguay, we see that these groundbreaking ceremonies, then things fall behind schedule, then they're not as good as you think they're going to be. But the CAFM has been, from everything we've seen from the videos, from the facilities, it looks extremely well done, up to international standard. And what we really wanted is for the girls to then be able to use it. And so this week, for the first time, the under-17s, Paraguay under-17s, got to use the facilities as they were doing like what they call a microciclo, like they were just together, training together for a bit. And of course, we're going to get the senior women's team are going to have the chance to use it in the build up to these really important qualifiers for the World Cup. Because if you remember, in the Copa America, they fell maybe just short, I guess, of qualifying directly through the Copa America, but that was still an amazing effort as well. But now they're in the intercontinental playoffs with this chance. They need to go to Australia and New Zealand for the 2023 World Cup. So my highlight's that. I hadn't thought of a low point. I'll come back to you. You go, Roberto, and then I'll come back to you.
I mean, where to begin for low points? I mean, yeah, I think I have to agree with Fede in saying that I think in terms of maybe the bust of the year, you know how they always say that for season and whatnot. I think Marcelo Martin Moreno is up there. Maybe he is the undisputed winner because there was so much faith given to him, especially coming in as the replacement for Mauro Boselli, who had left. And, you know, like Fede said, he was coming in as the top goal scorer of the South American qualifiers. So he had that in his resume, and for him to not show up consistently when the fans wanted him to, I think it shows him that it's a big failure. And I think if he does leave, or whatever his legacy is, it certainly won't be a very positive one. I think in terms of low point, I do have one that I do want to mention before I go to my high point. I think one of the low points, and this has kind of been an issue that for me, and I think for Fede and Ralph, you know, you guys consistently have seen this for way much more than I have been. But I just think, you know, the violence really is been just really, really awful. You know, you saw that, I think, in some of the Olimpia Libertad game, the one that played at Defensores, where the game got abandoned after Libertad took the lead, I think like 3-4-0 at halftime, and the seats were taken out, and there was just like a lot of issues. And you don't only see that within just these type of games. I mean, or even sport as a whole. You see that, I think the other day there was a fight between barras and basketball at the Olympia Kings arena. So this has just been an issue that, and it's not just in Paraguay, I think it's happening in all of South America, where fan violence has just been completely out of control, and the cops and those that are, you know, really there to help reinforce these type of things are not doing what they're supposed to do, or at least they're not having the capacity to be able to contain such of these issues. And I think that's really bad, because I think you have so many people from around the world that want to go to Paraguay, be it a scout, be it those that like football, or just in general, even for players as a whole, they want to be safe. And, you know, when you're seeing that type of violence happening, especially in 2022, when, you know, things can go quickly in terms of social media, and there's like a lot of like restrictions nowadays to get people in there because of, you know, security reasons, of maybe threats of, I don't know, bombs or terrorist events or anything like that. I think for that to still happen in Paraguay, I think it's sad to see. But hopefully, like, these incidents that we have seen can serve as a lesson for what to not do in 2023, and to say, hey, you know, we can't have this happen, because if we're going to host a World Cup, which the plan is for them to host one in 7 years if they get the bid, we don't want to have these issues. We do not want to see fans take out seats at the Defensor del Chaco or the La Olla, wherever, and then throw it into the ground at a World Cup game. So that's something that I think, especially after a lot of people have been so positive on Paraguay for the hosting of the Odesur, the South American games. I think they need to be like, okay, we need to reinforce this stuff in our football. And if we can't protect our own people, how on earth are we going to protect those that come into the country as well? So that's kind of my low point. A high point, I think, yeah, you mentioned NC. I think you mentioned the opening of a women's training facility for women's football, which is a huge development into the game as a whole. for me, I think I'll go for the obvious. I think a more recent one, I think, is Miguel Almirón's streak, currently at Newcastle, like, winning player of the month, winning goal of the month, becoming the top goal scorer at Newcastle, Newcastle team that at the time is doing well in third place, still in the fight for not just Champions League qualification, but for the Premier League as a whole. Won't tell Roth that though, because he has his connection to a certain team. But no, I think just, after so much criticism has been given to him over the last 3 years of his time in Newcastle, where even our own people were starting to think, oh, is this gonna, really come it off? Are we really gonna ever see a Paraguayan do well in the Premier League? Like, there was always those doubts. And here he is, cutting out all the doubts out there, helping this Newcastle side do well. And, I think credit for him, because he's always been a player that has always demonstrated his work rate. He knows what type of player he is. The fans adore him for what he's like. But of course, it's those kind of things of like, what have you done for me lately? And like, how many goals he scored, how important you can be to the team, and how well you can help the team. I think for Miggy to finally get his flowers when it's been necessary for quite some time, I think is really great to see. And hopefully it continues that way, obviously, with the start of the season, the restart, I should say, coming in a few weeks and into the new year, to see how Newcastle do fare out at the end of the year. Because it would be nice to see him play in European football. And I think that helps us even more get more attention towards Paraguayan players as a whole, to see if they can do what Almiron has done over there in Newcastle. So Ralph, yeah, you do have a low point that you wanted to mention. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'm ready. Okay. I mean, I was thinking, for me, the low point really, we talked about a player, we talked about, I guess, the situation as a whole. I was thinking of a team. The team that disappointed the most is Sol de America for me, because Sol de America somehow managed to get themselves relegated in a season where there were plenty of candidates. I mean, 12 de Octubre, actually, maybe they could be in here too. They have an awful season, not just points, but also the whole way the team is being managed, the club, the finances, everything is a mess. But Sol de America is a team that was in a fairly good position, and that was very well organized and managed. And they managed to slip away towards the very end, and they lost direction. And I think for me, Sol de America is a big club in relative to Paraguayan standards that should be in Primera. It's similar to when Luqueño were relegated last year. They should be there. And one of the worst things for Sol de America is they had their coach, Pumpido. They got rid of him. He went to Emiliano. He kept Emiliano up, and Sol de America went down. So even worse is, in terms of mismanagement, is one of their former coaches ended up keeping up the other side in their place. So I think, yeah, for me, the low point there, or one of the biggest busts, was Sol de America.
Only in football do you see those things, right? Those kind of changes. Yeah, on one side getting fired and then having the championship at the end of the year. That situation was really weird with Pompido. That's not going to start the year with Emiliano. That's always weird here in Paraguay. Sometimes you got teams that come from second division to first division, but they don't have their coach with them. The one that took them there, or the one that got the championship at the end of the year. Emiliano's situation is going to go it out down that road again. They're going to go back to Humberto Garcia, the coach that actually started the season. They already hired him again to start the season in 2023. And just as Roberto was going through Miguel Almirón's situation, I mean, it was the same year when that Grealish was talking shit about this guy, right? I mean, and look how he used this totally for him, and how much credit he got out of it, right? I mean, he put fans by his side. I mean, those flags, people showing his support. And now this situation with Grealish in the World Cup, finally getting the chance to talk about the situation, because we really hadn't heard Grealish's side of the story after he was pretty much drunk that night, and he made that video, right? Because he was clearly drunk when he said what he said, and he confirmed it. He said that he had a couple of drinks that night, and it was a stupid thing that he did, and he really felt bad about it. And I was actually really proud to hear that from Grealish, because it talked really good about him, and he talks even way better, or even better about Miguel Almirón, just the way he took it, right? I mean, he used it for he put it on his side. And when they asked him a couple of weeks ago when he got that Player of the Month award, and he took it with such grace, he gave no credit whatsoever to that situation. And that's just beautiful. I think next time they'll run into each other in a Premier League game, they'll probably hug, and we're just gonna put this behind. But it was a great episode, and it even helped him out, I believe, just to kind of even break through in that Premier League. I mean, they got a franchise player as of right now in Newcastle. I mean, I think they want him for the long term. They don't want Miggy to go nowhere now.
No, they don't. And I think it was credit for Jack to even say that, if he was in Miggy's shoes, he'd probably feel a bit bitter and try to say, oh, I don't know anything about this guy. But the fact that Miggy took the right road to say that, he respected him, and, he hoped he has a good career, I think it shows the mutual respect. And yeah, like Fede said, I think it's glad to see that that's been kind of taken out of any sort of like fight or beef or anything like that. So that's good to see on that end. And yeah, a lot of good points that both of you guys had to make from a high and from a low. And I think one way to close this out on what's been a great year in Paraguayan football, or at least discussing it, what are some of the things that you want to see improved? I mean, certainly, there's a lot of things that are going to be happening next year. Obviously, we're going to see what happens in this title race. New teams coming in, Sportivo Luqueño, for example, coming back, Trinidense back at the first division as well. Without some of the teams like Sudamérica, like Ralph had said, obviously teams in Libertadores and Sudamericana. We'll see what the Paraguayan national team does, both on the men's and women's side, as one of them looks to qualify for the World Cup, while the other one continues to find its message and its root. I mean, Ralph, I'll go to you on this one first. What are some of the things that you want to see improved in Paraguayan football, or at least like some of the things you just want to see that maybe you couldn't have a chance to see this year in 2022?
Yeah, I think, what I really want to see is some Paraguayan players back in those top 5 leagues. We mentioned 2 of them, the major 2, but what we've seen is, I think, in recent years is that our players not managing to make it at that higher level. So what I'm hoping for first in January is a good Sudamericano with the younger players, because that can often be a good platform to leap into Europe and start playing there. And then to see better management of the clubs. I think we haven't gone into this in much detail, but it's something that's almost an open secret in Paraguay, that many agents and representatives are almost taking control of clubs. I'm not going to name names, but in certain clubs, they have a lot of influence and a lot of power. And unfortunately, that's not allowing the best players to always get through, or even the best coaches, because sometimes they don't just represent players, they represent coaches. So I think hopefully removing some of that and having more of the transparent system will then help us for that next bit, which is getting those players up to the top 5 leagues in Europe, which is what we need. Because when you look at the World Cup, there's a few teams like Japan today actually had I think 3 players from their local league still, but that's really rare. I mean, all the big teams, all their major stars, and they have at least 3 or 4 in those top 5 leagues in Europe. And that's just the way football is at the moment. And that's where we need our Paraguayans to get if we're going to start competing for the World Cup. Just for the World Cup place. I mean, not to win it, just to get in it.
I'm with you on that, Ralph. I think it's really hard for that situation to develop even players with as many teams as we have as of right now in the first division. I mean, we don't have that many teams, so it's not that easy for players to get through, right? I mean, just look at the goalkeepers. I mean, there's very few that are young. That's a position that I'm always talking about, because that's somewhere that we don't have that many players as of right now. Even if you look at the signings, most of the teams that are coming into the first division are going to sign goalkeepers, foreigners. They're going to sign them from Argentina, from Uruguay, because why? Because they don't give the chances to the young guys. So yeah, that's totally something that I want to see evolve here in Paraguay. I want to see the big teams look even more at the younger players. I want Cerro Porteño to do it. I want Olimpia to do it. I want Olimpia also to put this financial situation behind them. I think that's very important, not just for them, but also for the Paraguayan League and for the big teams to have some sort of drive into the Libertadores, especially, these last couple of years have been really hard for these teams to try to make it big, and mostly it's been because Olympia has not been able to put money in their squad. They had to have pretty much uh, do what they can with what they have. And even though they've had a couple of championships, you could see that in the international stage, it's just not enough, right? You got to take it to the next level. That's why Cerro Porteño had a couple signings, like Marcelo Moreno Martins, like we were saying, trying to take it to that next level. They just couldn't do it again with Chiqui Arce. I think he's going to have one last shot this year, also in the Libertadores. So I'm hoping for that situation. I'm hoping for a big tournament out of these teams in Libertadores, maybe in Sudamericana, even having one of the surprises. And and I do think that we're gonna maybe take it for next year. Is see the big teams move around a little bit more in the countryside. I would love to see Olimpia, Cerro Porteño go way more to Ciudad del Este, way more to Encarnacion now that we have a new stadium. I want to see these teams go there because really here in Asunción, around the capital, most of the games you don't have the best atmosphere. You don't have that many fans on the stands. So I think that usually helps out to see better games for the players. Also, that's really good. So I'm hoping that the big teams kind of move around a little bit more on the countryside and make it more of a show, Roberto. I think that's what we need also to try to kind of build a better league, right? I mean, you got to take the big teams to the people that want to see these teams, and I think the FA kind of has to work on that. I also want to see that in the Copa Paraguay because we even saw in some of the stages in the Copa Paraguay that the big teams were playing in their own stadiums. That's freaking crazy. Go play in Ciudad del Este, go play in Encarnacion, go play in the countryside, go play in the small stadiums. So people feel attracted to those games. I mean, I think we can work a lot better in that sense, just to make the league a lot better. And yeah, obviously I want to see players get out of this country because we need to build a good national team. That's obviously the big goal for next year, to build a good national team and hopefully start our road to the World Cup that's going to be played in 2026. That's if I'm wishing for something at the end of the year, I just want to see a good national team again because I'm so freaking tired of watching the World Cup on TV, Roberto.
Aren't we all? Aren't we all? Well, I mean, for some countries, yeah, they also feel that frustration as well. But having said that, yeah, no, I agree with both of you guys' points. I think, obviously, I think there has to be a level of improvement on all levels, from the national team, from the club game as well, from just how the game is really set up and how players are able to move from club to club, trying to get them into certain teams and just how it's being run. I think that's always been an issue that we've spoken about so many times. And, hopefully that come into 2023 that we can see some of the lessons, and maybe this World Cup serves as a lesson, like Ralph had said, like looking at Japan, like obviously we don't want to completely compare them to Paraguay, but just looking at how who it's a country that primarily is not a football country. It's not, and historically at least, but yet they made it to the round of 16 and they're consistently at World Cups always because of the way that they go through things. And you would think that Paraguay can take lessons from not just their South American neighbors, from other countries in Africa and Asia, Europe, North America, and just look at what they are doing and say, hey, what can we do that is not exactly the same as what they're doing, but at least take some influence to say, we can do this, but we also can keep to our roots. I think it's fine to take lessons from that. And it's also fine to be organic. So I think, yeah, I agree with all you guys' points. I think it's something that hopefully come next year, we could talk more on a positive note on Paraguayan teams doing well in various things, or Paraguayan players doing well at various clubs, and just seeing what goes from there. I think that's really the what we as fans at the end of the day, because we are fans, we love this sport. I think we don't do this if we didn't love it. We do this because we love it, and we want to see our players do well. We want to see why Paraguayans deserve to get all the recognitions in the world. And yeah, I think that's something that hopefully next year we can definitely see that. So no, I think, guys, it's been a fantastic year speaking about Paraguayan football. Let's hope for much, much more heading in 2023. And I also want to thank everyone who's been tuning in. Honestly, without you guys, obviously me, Fede, Ralph and Maria have done the heavy lifting talking about Paraguayan football, but we can't thank you more enough for supporting us, from anyone from all around the world, our guests as well, that we've had the fortune of having to speak about things about their lives, about their being directed to Paraguayan football. I think it's a tremendous thing. So yeah, thank you to everyone who has contributed to us and has always continued to support us as we continue to grow, hopefully in the same way that Paraguayan football can grow as well next year. So thank you again. Hope to see all of you guys next year and keep on supporting Paraguayan football as a whole in 2023. For myself, Roberto Rojas, Fede Perez, and Ralph Hannah, thank you so much for listening in. See you soon.